Have you ever been invaded before, Tarnished? I mean, unless playing online is an alien concept to you, you most likely have at some point, if you ever played Souls games. But anyway, I'm talking about those pesky bad red men who suggestively force their way into your world with the sole purpose of ruining your fun while bringing you nothing but misery, pain, and sadness. Or at least, that's the impression you'd get if you ever visit the Elden Ring subreddit. Believe it or not, invaders are players who, like girls, just want to have fun, in their own way, of course. The invasion mechanic of Souls games has been a matter of debate since the inception of the entire series. No Souls game has passed through the ages unscathed. All of them have fallen prey to posts upon posts written by gamers with no hair follicles whatsoever left, complaining about the bad red man ruining their game experience without any mercy or consideration. To some players, invaders are the Antichrist itself.
Whoa.
Excuse me, what?
But why is this the case? What is exactly an invasion? Why do gamers have so much beef with them? And is the mechanic really fair? Today we are taking a look at invasions, the most controversial mechanic in gaming history.
You are coping and seething.
Before we jump into today's video, the mystery weapon from our last video was none other than the amazing Shamshir. Big congrats to the snickerdoodles who answered correctly. Stay tuned until the end for the last game of Mystery Weapon of the Year. Before starting to yap about invasions and the intricacies about them, I think all of us should be on the same page. So I called a friend who's experienced in invading your sorry marshmallow butts to explain to you what an invasion is and how they work. So pay attention, my little nockis. Hang on a second, little poggies. Girl, what are you doing?
Should I come out now?
Yeah, no you gotta come out. It's your turn and we're running on a schedule here. Move your ass.
Fine. You don't have to be rude and push me.
We're not paying you to treat you like a Disney princess, pal. You make me lose the New Year's party and I will show you what rude really is.
Hello, Tarnished. Long time no see. Anyway, since I won't get the full cut of my payment if I don't finish on schedule, let me start right away. In Souls games, there has been a mechanic since the beginning of times where, depending on the circumstances, another gamer could enter your world with one purpose: switching your breathing status from on to off. This kind of player is called an invader. They would appear like another player but with a red shade, and a message would pop up on your screen indicating that you're now engaging in a funnily called non-consensual PvP encounter. But was it really non-consensual? You see, Tarnished, certain conditions had to be met for you to be invaded. The core condition is different depending on which game we're talking about. In Dark Souls 1, for example, you had to be in human form and coursing through an area where the boss was alive to be invaded. Every time you stopped being alive, you'd respawn in hollow form by the last bonfire you interacted with. Being hollow would prevent you from interacting with some bonfire and online features, such as kindling to increase your healing flasks or summoning other gamers to assist you. If you wanted to summon assistance, you had to use a humanity and then burn it at the bonfire to restore your human form in order to summon friends. But this would open your world to invaders. So technically speaking, by becoming a human again, you are inviting invaders to your world. Sort of. If you were to play the whole game as a hollow, you'd never see an invader, not even an NPC invader. Sure, you would miss on co-op play, but no pesky red man would interrupt your session. Although, to be fair, it kind of is understandable if you were new to the game and wanted to just chill and explore with a friend. But every time you did, a max level tumor would spawn out of nowhere and wipe you out with a single spell. But hold on. Let me ask you something. Was my previous statement really accurate? You may see statements from gamers online claiming that they were invaded by a max-level invader and how they had no chance at beating them. But is this really true? The answer is no, you silly goober.
It's false. No way. Not this time. No. It's totally made up. Pure fiction. It's fiction. It's a total fabrication.
You see, you can only get invaded by people near your level. There was a simple formula that was used to calculate what people could invade you and what people could be invaded by you. These were the formulas for the different online interactions. If you by now have passed your elementary school math classes, you can see that being invaded by a max level player, which would be around level 700, while being low level, is completely impossible.
¡Imbécil!
In fact, if you take a look at the equation, it is much more probable to be invaded by someone who has a lower level than you than being invaded by a player of a higher level. What was very possible, though, was to be invaded by a type of player called twink. Ranni and Waifu have discussed twinks extensively in this video right here in case you want to check it out. But to summarize, a twink is a player who has optimized their build to invade in low levels. Twinks in Dark Souls 1 used to feel like max level players because there was no weapon matchmaking, which meant that a level 30 invader could carry around a +5 Chaos Zweihander around and one-shot you as if he was swatting a fly on the wall with a newspaper. This was fixed in more recent titles. However, even when adding twinks into the mix, invading was not an easy task. Groups of gamers that were at least minimally prepared to PvP were a pain in the butt to deal with. Invaders in Dark Souls 1 could not use healing flasks, meaning that they could only heal with the very slow-to-cast humanities or with the very limited divine blessings. And hosts could heal all their phantoms at the same time by healing themselves with a flask. And just as twinks could gear up with max-level weapons, groups of players could also gear up with max-level weapons. It was a nightmare. We're not going to talk about Dark Souls 2 because the invasion system in that game is a subject for an entirely different video. And since Dark Souls 3 is relatively similar to Elden Ring, we are going to talk about the state of the invasion system as it is today and judge if it deserves the hate it receives. So back to you, Blue Smurf with anger management issues.
I swear to God, these people. So, how much more different is the invasion system in Elden Ring compared to Dark Souls 1? In Elden Ring, the summon formula is still quite similar, meaning that you will most likely be invaded by someone who has a lower level than yours. Invaders can now use Estus flasks, but so can your co-op phantoms. And you can have twice the flasks, meaning that between you and your 2 phantoms, you can have nearly 30 healing flasks. Compared to the 7 healing flasks of an invader, weapon matchmaking prevents you from being invaded by people with high-level weapons, so the damage ranges between the invader and you will be similar, and the inclusion of password summoning means that you can summon phantoms of max level if you wish to do so. But the most important detail of them all, unlike Dark Souls 1, where you could be invaded while you were alone, Elden Ring restricts invaders to only hosts with summons. That means that the majority of times the invader will be outmatched, at least 2 to 1. And I say majority because if the host uses an item called Taunter's Tongue, they can get solo invaded. But realistically, no regular PvE player does that. So this time, in both scenarios, you are technically asking to be invaded for real. If you get invaded while co-oping, you have a friend and blue hunters to help you. If you get invaded alone, it's because you specifically asked for it, and you sign an agreement that states this before starting online play every time. So legally, you have no right to complain. At least not legally. When it comes to the functionality of invasions when regarding new players to the game, things start to fall apart a little bit. First of all, what did Big Papa Miyazaki intend when he introduced invasions? Let's take a look at his quote. "My vision of invasions wasn't to introduce player killing. It's more akin to a strong enemy being controlled by a human. That's the vision I wanted to achieve. If there wasn't the system message pop-up that said a dark spirit has invaded, the gameplay experience should be similar to an offline single-player game with a very strong enemy popping up randomly. They don't speak. It could be perhaps a very smart AI. That was the vision. What I wanted to create was not a PvP match, but fearsome enemies roaming the world."
What?
Whether or not the invader is a fearsome enemy is up to debate, because that depends on the experience of the player invading. Sometimes, at least, an invader can be the most sweaty PvP overlord you'll ever see, or it can be a park in the walk. Although normally invaders tend to be somewhat experienced in PvP, as opposed to PvE players. It's a reality that normal PvE players are not that good at the game, especially in Elden Ring, considering its success with the masses. And since these players are the majority, they will be invaded by very experienced invaders, be absolutely destroyed despite having every advantage possible, and be left with a sour taste in their mouth, feeling like what just happened was extremely unfair, and run to Reddit to write the next Bible on how invaders should be imprisoned for crimes against humanity. Sadly though, most of the times, losing to an invader in Elden Ring is a skill issue, and that is the harsh reality. Oh, but don't take it from me. Take it from the PvE player by excellence, Asmongold.
Man, suck it, dude. It's a 2v1. Wow, what a cool game.
Because invasions in Elden Ring were balanced towards inexperienced PvE players, the lack of skill had to be complemented by something, otherwise they would just be steamrolled by most invaders. However, that doesn't excuse the faulty system that allows this to happen in the first place, and that in itself is an issue. A game should never reach a point where it has to be balanced towards the lowest common denominator of player skill, and I seriously mean no offense by this, because that's when players that really understand the game start taking advantage of the system. That's why fighting a group of players that are skilled is an absolute nightmare. Gank squads have never been more powerful in the whole series, and invaders simply do not have the resources to fight them properly, since a good team of players basically have all the resources of the invader, times 3.5. How on the moon's name do you even begin to balance that without screwing new players in the process?
Good question.
In our opinion, there should be a middle ground. Skill and game knowledge have to be earned, especially in these titles, known for their difficulty and overcoming challenges. Balancing toward the type of player that will probably play the game once and never touch it again, or even worse, never finish it, is never a good idea in the long run, and it hurts the longevity of the game. Players need to earn their victories in this game, but balancing towards the super hardcore portion of the player base and leaving new players unattended is also a bad idea. So what can be done? There will never be a perfect system, but hey, at least give new players a system, something that will allow them to naturally increase their PvP skill. We don't mind fighting players with any skill amount, personally. If we're presented with a big challenge, we try to overcome it. Sadly, not everyone has this mentality. Invasions were designed with the condition that gamers would try to overcome the challenge of a player-controlled NPC trying to get them, instead of dipping as soon as their phantoms kick the bucket.
This is illegal, you know.
However, trying to acquire the mentality that Miyazaki had in mind when he created Invasions is something you should strive for. Despite what some unwashed man-childs like to preach, invasions are not about ruining fun. They can be very fun and exciting. Facing challenges with a strong will to prevail and remain victorious is something that doesn't only work in Souls games. It also works in real life. You know, that thing that exists outside of Elden Ring. Nobody's going to improve your life for you if you just complain to the moon day and night. You have to put in some work for things to happen, for changes to be made. And the sooner you come to terms with this reality, the sooner you'll start living better. So while I do understand where these complaints come from, don't be like these Morlocks. Because if you start to complain like this when it comes to mere video games, then what's left for when real life kicks you in the balls, huh, my dear friend? Happy New Year, Tarnished. I wish you nothing but the best, and I hope all of your wishes for the next year come true. Never give up, and you will achieve all of your goals.